serves the people.
We are back. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Calvarowski, and as always, the yang to my yin, Susan Hobson's here. Susan, how are you?
I am good today, and I'm saying good because I am a highly sensitive, empathic soul, and it is -30 in Toronto today. So I am definitely feeling the depths of winter over here on this end. I got a sick little girl at home too. I kind of feel like it's just par for this course here in the first week of February, right?
It's tough. We had -30 yesterday, and I was doing my morning stand outside.
Oh, you're a brave soul.
It was tough yesterday. The wind was brutal, but today it's only -2, so we're back in the warmth.
You're winning.
And as always, we got to start off with a quote. And so I have one here from Carl Jung, and he says, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious."
Tell us why you picked that one today, sir.
Well, I mean, first off, we're going to be talking a little bit about wisdom with our guest, but also I think that this is something that we're starting to see is a lot of companies are going or preparing for economic downturns or uncertainty, or even folks that we work with, some of them are doing anything to avoid looking inwards.
Yeah.
And obviously I want to just start there as a prompt for folks is if you're doing something that you realize is starting to be not serving you, that's a light that, or a cue that something needs to be enlightened or looked at more deeply. So we'll start there.
That's why we call emotions intel, right? Like that's valuable feedback in terms of where you might be out of alignment, perhaps. But we'll get deeper into that. We've got an excellent guest who's going to help us tear this one apart today. So why don't we go ahead and get him introduced so our people can plug in?
Absolutely. We have a special guest. Randy Hain is with us. He's the author of Upon Reflection and Essential Wisdom for Leaders of Every Generation. He's also the founder of Serviam Partners and the co-founder of the Leadership Foundry. Randy, how are you?
I'm very good, Rob and Susan. It's good to be with you guys.
It's great to have you here. And Randy, before we get into some of the stuff you've written about and leadership in general, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I always start with the most important things. I'm Sandra's husband, and we've been married for 28 years. And I've got 2 adult sons, Alex, who's 25, and Ryan, who's 22. And very passionate about my family and making sure that that's a priority for me. I have been a senior executive and run businesses first 25 years of my life. Had a good eclectic background that probably was my training for the executive coaching and leadership consulting that I've really been doing for the last 11 or 12 years. And somewhere along the way, I picked up a real taste for writing, a love of it, and I try to write books when I can. So I've written 9 books, and I'm working on my 10th, and try to stay very active in my church and the community, and give back at every opportunity. So that's kind of the essential Randy.
Oh my gosh, I love how you started with your wife. That's a first, Rob, on our show, and people are telling us about themselves. That's obviously where leadership begins for you, right? On the home front. So that's where I want to go next is just what does leadership mean to you? And a little bit about what inspired you to go on your own leadership journey as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I'm very fond of a saying that, and I'm gonna probably screw this up as I kind of try to quote it, but I've heard and I believe that leadership is any time that you inspire, motivate, teach, encourage, help other people. And I've always tried to subscribe to that. The best leaders I know are always thinking about ways and acting in ways that do those things. So when I think about the pure definition of leadership, it's not about the metrics. It's not about, killing your numbers. It's about, are the people around you better off because of their experience and their interaction with you? So I learned that from my parents at a young age, and I've just always tried to practice that. My mom and dad, both were hardworking people. If there was a bottom rung of the middle class ladder, we were hanging on by one pinky. So we didn't have a lot of extras in our house, but we had love. And I just saw my parents lead in a way that was always instructive. They led through their actions. They led through their words. They gave to others. They served others. And that just always stuck with me. So I think my parents were that early influence that always made me want to be that kind of leader for the people in my charge.
Love it. And so as somebody who spent 25 years, you said, in corporate,
Yes.
what inspired you to go out on your own as an entrepreneur into the leadership coaching space?
I don't know if anyone graduates from college and thinks, I want to be an executive coach. That's not something I often hear. But I can tell you that, my mom and dad were good coaches in their own way. And I kind of saw that. And I just noticed that as I got into, my business life, I was a good listener. I thought I gave, good advice. I tried to be helpful. So I think some of the early seeds were planted by my mom and dad and my work experiences. But as I got older and got into my late 30s and 40s, early 40s, I definitely recognized that I was developing a love for coaching. And in my mid 40s, in fact, I was 46 years old, exactly 25 years after I'd begun my career, I launched a company called Serviam Partners. And Serviam, ironically, is Latin for I will serve. And I decided to indulge this growing passion for executive coaching and consulting with leaders. And what's really strange is I'm not an entrepreneurial person. I'm not really a big risk taker. But when you're faced with, you've got to do what you love or you're going to stagnate. You got to do what you love or you're going to die. I just felt like I needed to do it. And my wife and I had a lot of discussions because this is a family decision too. But she was very supportive, and I launched it. And quite frankly, I haven't worked a day since. When you do what you love, you don't work.
Oh, I love that last part.
Yeah. So Randy, I want to go a little bit deeper there. Is like, I know a lot of folks, they get hung up on that mental gap of, hey, I need to get out of corporate, or I want to get out of corporate, but I'm getting the steady paycheck. I got the RRSP or the 401k, and I'm, locked in on my benefits, and, it's only another 6 months before my bonus is paid out. Right?
Yeah. We hear that one a lot.
Like, how did you get over that mental block of the stability of the finances?
Well, a couple of things. In my household, maybe more than others, we have a special needs son. Our oldest son, Alex, has autism. And so my wife has been a stay-at-home mom and a million other things, other hats that she wears, for us to make sure that our family dynamic was working. So I was the breadwinner, but we have always, done things together and jointly, and we share responsibility for everything. But I think, knowing that I was the sole breadwinner was definitely a caution flag. I had to be very careful. So what I did, because I'm a pretty methodical person, a good planner, I think, I interviewed other coaches for a year. I went out and gathered best practices. I knew going in exactly what to expect. But something that may be the topic of another show is I'd spent 25 years not just working and experimenting. I spent 25 years building a brand and a reputation and a foundation and lots of relationships. So when I was going out to the very same people that I've been working with in my previous life, they already kind of saw me as a coach. So the transition was not from, A to Z. It was more like from A to B. It was a very subtle thing. And I knew going into this that I had a lot of support and clients that were ready to buy from me. So I guess my advice, the net of it is, make sure that you think about what you're doing, that there is an audience that's ready to buy what you've got, and just be prepared. And I was prepared. I knew what to expect. And being a man of faith, there was a lot of prayer that went into that too, I assure you.
Tell us a little bit more about that and the role, because we've been really unpacking this whole concept of purpose so far in 2023. We saw a lot of traction in that space, right? Coming out of the pandemic, people had a chance to really kind of go inward and really dial into some of that emotional feedback, right? Like not feeling so fulfilled perhaps by the track that they were on in corporate or wherever. And so what role does purpose play in answering that call, in your humble opinion?
So I think I think there are two things there, Susan. One is, I think you've got to be very clear about your priorities. And my priorities are super clear. It's faith, family, and work in that order. And when I take good care of faith and family, work thrives. And I've known that. That's not a theory. That's not something I read in a book. That's been the way my life has played out. So I think having your priorities straight is definitely important. But I think the other thing is, you use the word purpose. I tend to probably use the word mission more. So I'll tell you a very quick story, if I may, if we have time.
Please.
9.5 years ago, I was meeting with a new coaching client, and it was our second meeting. And she was the chief operating officer for a very well-known nonprofit in the city of Atlanta. And we were having our second coaching meeting at a sort of a cohabitation work facility place. And she was at the time 34 years old, Duke MBA, and one of those people who makes coffee nervous. Have you been around those people before?
Yes.
Edgy. And I'm very calm, so I'm like the antidote to that. But she walks into the room and she slams down on the table a 2-page document. And she points at it and said, "Hey, today I'm dying to talk about mission statements. Before I show you mine, I want to hear what yours is, Randy." So she gets out her notepad and she wants to take notes and hear about my mission statement. And I'm kind of like, okay, this will be interesting. It's 2 words. You don't have to write it down. No. It's got to be something more complicated. I want to know what your mission statement is. It can't be 2 words. It's 2 words. No. She kept arguing. And I just half kiddingly said, "We're going to have to end our meeting today because you're not listening. I promise you it's 2 words. Would you like to hear it?" And she calmed down and said, yeah. Tell me what it is. And I said, "Okay, serve others." And she immediately responded with, "Can't be, that's too easy, too simple." And I said, "Okay, here's the deal. The way my parents raised me, my life experiences, and my Catholic faith have all taught me that when I serve the needs of others, I get everything that I need. So I have crystallized down into 2 words, my purpose, my mission, how I choose to live, and my coaching, consulting, fatherhood, being a husband, community service, all orients under that banner of I'm here to serve others. So I know how I'm living." I said, "Now let me test you." So I took her document, I flipped it over, and I wouldn't let her read it. And I said, "Tell me your mission." And she gave me something that sounded like a master's thesis. I live at the nexus of this. I'm at the intersection of that. It was gobbledygook. I have no idea what she said. So that day we got her down to 1 sentence. And then she's a good friend of mine and we stay in touch. But she always tells me to tell the story. She's now down to 5 words. But she went from 1.5 pages to 5 words. And now she's much clearer about her mission and purpose.
I love it. What's the method behind that madness, Randy? Like I love challenging clients in this way, but for those listening who don't understand the importance of boiling it down to something that might seem simple, right? From the outside looking in, what's the method to that madness?
I think part of it is, in terms of getting people on board with different thinking and challenging them, I think it's got to start with respectful candor. This is the tone of voice I always use. I'm always going to tell you exactly what I think. I'll often ask permission, maybe candid with you. Can I share an observation with you? But I'm always going to tell you what I think. And I think over time, people have learned to value that in my personal and work relationships. Randy's a true speaker. We're going to get the real deal from him. And I also try to be helpful. I'm not just going to zing you. I'm going to say, here's what we can do about it. So I think that's part of it. But I think the other element of your question is people tend to overcomplicate things. I love simplicity. In fact, the second chapter of my book, Essential Wisdom, is called Embracing Simplicity, because I firmly believe we need to boil things down. I'm in an office, my home office. There are probably 150 books around me. I read all the same leadership books you guys do. I have to. But you know what? When I write and speak, I'm all about boiling it down. Here's the idea, 3 things you need to know, 4 best practices, because that's how the people I engage with, that's how they think, and that's what they need. They want to digest it and get going. But a lot of people tend to overcomplicate things.
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, why do you think that is? Like, I think a lot of companies, when they go down that path of mission, vision, values, it's like they're getting in either a consulting company or they're doing something complicated because they feel like, I think they feel like it makes them or that exercise more valuable. But I mean, as you said, it's like it's hard for people to digest. And then when you're making a decision in the morning or during the day, it's hard to really, like if you have a 10-page document, it's hard to follow that decision, right?
You know, in my experience, both corporate America and then as a coach and consultant serving corporate America, you know, I think that there is a bias against simplicity. Well, if it's simple, it must not be very good. If it's simple, it's probably not going to meet our needs, which is just garbage. Listen, and listen, no offense to your listeners who work for McKinsey. I respect McKinsey. But when you bring in McKinsey and you spend $10 million for this beautiful, 873-page document that's going to tell you how to do X, you probably could have just sat around a table for 3 days and figured it out yourselves. It doesn't have to be, but you know what? If you bring in McKinsey, you'll never get fired by the board because you went to the best. You got the best.
Yeah, this is true.
But sometimes the answer is simple. Sometimes it's getting the newest employee of your firm to say, hey, what are we doing wrong? Why don't you give us your input? I want to hear from you. You're the newest person here. What can we do better? What a brilliant idea. Go to the new person, encourage people to be open and honest, and then the answers will reveal themselves. But I just think there's a tendency to want to go for the answer that just looks really pretty with a bow on it, but sometimes it's in your backyard and you just have to go look for it,
Mm-hmm.
That's my 2 cents.
We love your 2 cents, Randy. I want to talk about your book, though, because this is going to take us some time to unpack all the golden nuggets in this bad boy. So your book is called Upon Reflection, and you have these 3 really requisite leadership skills, I would say, right? That you really highlight in your book. Ask, listen, and invest. Can you break that down for us in terms of why you boiled it down to those 3?
Well, if you contrast that to what most leaders go through, which is a sort of just a quick check the box exercise. Yeah, I got to meet with Susan on the team. Got to just kind of talk about goals. Okay, 30 minutes. Susan, thanks a lot. You have a good day now. That's often the extent of our, really trying to figure out what our team needs from us. So when I wrote that chapter, I really wanted to challenge the leaders and the aspiring leaders that read it to really think about the 3 steps, the 3 actions I give you. When I say ask, I mean ask, probe. Susan, in the last year, have you had the kind of success that you were looking for? Susan, as you think about this year, what are 3 things specifically that you're trying to do that you need my help with? Hey, Susan, how can I lead you better this year? Where can I improve as a leader? And you notice what I'm doing here? None of this is generic. We doing okay? You doing okay? Have a great day. It's specific, and I'm giving you something specific because then you'll give me a specific answer. So when I think about ask, I mean really ask. But then what is the first cousin of asking? It's listening. You've got to actively listen. So, Rob, you've given me this great, sort of preview of what kind of year you want to have. And I need to make sure I'm listening on multiple levels because maybe you've given me great goals. Maybe you've given me a goal that's a stretch goal that we really need to talk about. Maybe you've stated something that I think is beyond your ability to get to in the next year, and I need to be honest with you about it. So instead of just, the pencil whipping exercise, I need to really listen on multiple levels to what you want from me. And then finally, invest. I've asked the right questions. I've listened with great attention, but now I need to help you. Notice, help you, not do for you. Help you put together a meaningful development outline or program where at the end of the year, you're going to feel like, man, I grew, I'm excelling in my career. My boss was there as a Sherpa to help me. And I really feel good about where I'm going in my career. So ask, listen, and invest is is as far away as diametrically opposed to the traditional review meeting as it can get. It's really going deep. And the leaders that do that absolutely are playing the role of coach. Leaders need to be coaches. And leaders that do what I just said are coaching their team, and they're successful.
I love that, Randy. And you said it, right? Is the average annual review is sort of like, here are some goals, here are some metrics. We'll put you in this training course and we'll see you next year. Like none of these, and again, it's back to your point, right? Like they're fairly simple steps, but they take effort and they take deliberate steps or deliberate practice, I suppose. Like, what do you think holds leaders back from just executing these steps?
So I'm going to commit some heresy on the show. Can we do a little heresy?
Absolutely.
Can we do a little heresy? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember when I was a young leader, it always makes me feel weird to say that, when I was a young man. Well, when I was a young leader and an aspiring leader, my bosses, the people that I work for, they took it as their responsibility to develop me as a leader. You know, I was given all kinds of difficult things to do to train me. I was given responsibility long before I got a title and a paycheck to teach me how to do what they did. So when I was in my 20s, all my bosses were truly coaches. And even in my 30s, I still was blessed with those kinds of leaders. But something happened. I can't tell you the time frame it happened, but something's happened in the last 20 years where I think leaders often, not all of them, I knew some great coach leaders, but I think a lot of them have said, that's HR's job. You know what? I'm going to bring in a coach. And that's what I do for a living. I often step in and fill a vacuum to help coach a leader because the leader above them is not doing it or not willing to do it. So I think that we have, as leaders, we've relinquished responsibility for developing our people. You know, and again, that's why consultants and coaches have, you know, probably fantastic, job security. But I think somewhere along the way, we forgot to be the coach. And we need to get back to that. If I coach an executive, I'm always challenging them to coach their people, always. In fact, a lot of what's in my books that you're talking about, you know, those are skills not only for you to master, but for you to teach your people. One of the things that I often do is I'll give this to my executive coaching clients, but I will ask them, tell them one of your ideas this year might be to have a sort of a book club with your team. Have them come together with you once a week and tell you about a chapter they've read and talk about it. Hey, I want to talk about clarity over lunch this week. And it's just this wonderful $15 resource that you can use for 8 or 9 months to teach your team. So that's my take.
I love it. And I guess I would so for those folks that don't have a leader that's a coach, how would you recommend they go out and find a coach?
You know, I think there are a number of things. Now, I wasn't always blessed with phenomenal coach leaders. So I always took it upon myself to invest in myself. You know, I'm a voracious reader. I read. I also identify people, I've always done this, who have skills and act a certain way or behave a certain way that I want to emulate in my own life. And I will go spend time with them. Hey, Rob, I noticed that you are an amazing presenter. I love how you present to the team. You've got a command of the language and you always motivate the troops. How do you do that? Can I buy you coffee? I want to pick your brain. And I would just go out, and I'm a master borrower. I will go out and find people that have great skills, and I will bring those into my world, but I'm going to own it. I'm going to read about it. I'm going to go find people that do it, and I'm going to go ask for the help. I was on a college campus yesterday, not only seeing my son, but I often speak to the students at Samford University in Alabama. And I was talking to them about this very thing about, you know, I'm here sharing some insights and thoughts about your career, but you have to own your career. You know, it's not somebody else's job for you to grow your career. It's your job. So what are you going to do about that? You know, there'll be people to help you, but you have to drive. You've got to be in the cab driving the truck. So, to answer your question, I really think that we just have to own the responsibility. And I think that's not something that we're teaching young leaders today.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're so shocked at the stat around it, the average leader not getting leadership development or training until the age 46. So that's why that's so important, that you got to initiate that, young folks. If you're listening out there, if you're aspiring to be a leader, right? Like you got to advocate for that.
Can I bore you guys with another story? It's a quick one, but it's so relevant. It's relevant.
Please. We love stories here.
So I was coaching an executive at a very large, well-known Atlanta company. And this particular leader was in charge of innovation and new growth. Big job, phenomenal guy, just really enjoyed the 6-month executive coaching engagement. And at the end of it, he said, this has been very meaningful to me. I wonder if I can get you to work with my team. And sure, I do team development all the time. And I thought he meant like his directs that, they were all going to be like 2 years behind him. But but what he meant was the team that was below that, more of the entry level, junior level people. Now I want you to picture 25 to 35-year-olds, brilliant. These are entrepreneurs. These are people that are creating things. These are inventor type people, really, really smart, but they had never had an ounce of leadership development. And he said, if I can get it approved, can you put together some kind of program to work with them the way you work with me? So we did it, and his company approved it. I'm really grateful that they did that. So what I did is I gave these young leaders, these young aspiring leaders, the same kind of executive coaching and leadership development that is reserved for the 46-year-old and older that you just mentioned. Mm-hmm. And isn't that kind of the problem? We wait until you get to the senior level to invest in you. We don't invest in you at the beginning of your journey. The whole thing's screwed up. The whole thing is upside down. So these leaders, it's my favorite coaching engagement in my entire life was working with them. And they were grateful. I loved it. I would have done it for free now that I think about it. But that's the problem. We don't invest at that level. We wait until you stumble and fumble your way to a senior level position.
I love it. Actually, yesterday I was on with some women who were 18 to 22, like they're still in college. And we were teaching them some of the fundamental stuff around self-awareness, emotional intelligence, mindset. And I literally said to them, I was like, I coach people who are in their mid 40s and they don't know this yet. So don't worry if it takes you time.
I think the reality is it's such an upstream advantage, which is why Rob and I are so surprised that companies aren't investing in their aspiring leaders and that there is such a gap, right? It's like waiting till your kids are on the road driving to actually get them a driver's license. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but I think we're mislabeling something that corporate America does. Corporations do. What they do is they provide the online course. There's a seminar you can attend. There's a thing you can go over here and sit in a room with 800 people and learn. Mm-hmm. That's not developing your people. Mm-hmm. That's training. Mm-hmm. Big difference. Mm-hmm. Coaches, consultants, engaging, getting to know people, tailoring the content to really serve where they're at, helping them and learning about them and helping them develop their goals. I think there's a whole lot of training going on. I don't think there's a whole lot of leadership development going on. So I just wanted to draw that distinction, Susan. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I think you're absolutely correct. I think we're still a little bit lost in the sauce in this space, to be honest with you. I know we saw a huge acceleration in this in terms of leaders coming to the table throughout the pandemic, throughout the disruption, and recognizing like their people needed this, right? But my question for you, since we're headed into another disruption, or at least that's everything we're hearing about in the coaching share these last couple of weeks, the economic downturn, oh no, here we go, right? Like a lot of these leaders, when that actually happens, the disruption, they go into that fight or flight or freeze mode. And that starts to show up in the decisions they're making in regards to investing in their leadership development and training. What would your advice be to those leaders out there who are getting triggered into that primal state?
I'll probably come at you, first of all, with maybe an anecdotal response. Anecdotally, I would tell you that the leaders I work with still are struggling to find good talent. They know that there is a talent war going on despite economic indicators. It's an interesting dilemma because all the other recessions I've experienced as a professional, lots of people lost their jobs and the economy was terrible. But now the economy is not great, and we've got actually an abundance of openings. So I think people are more nervous and attuned to this issue than maybe they would have been in past recessions. So I think they recognize, I'm feeling nervous, I'm a little freaked out, I don't know where we're going, but I sure can't lose Billy, Susan, and John. And I better make sure that I give them something. So either they are a little bit more aware of it than maybe in the past, or maybe they're listening to people like me and you guys when we talk about this and say, you better keep investing, even though I know the pennies are tight. So, one of the things that I'm advocating, even if you're not ready to bring in a consultant or spend a lot of money on whatever, at least talk to your people and just take it upon yourself to do it. Buy them a book, give them an article to read, do something to invest in your people, because, and again, they know that if they don't do it, they're going to lose them. Because, right now, at least in Atlanta, Georgia, I can tell you, if you're a young professional and you've got a decent degree and you've got a track record, you're eminently employable and you've got choices. You can go anywhere. The thing that's actually more of a problem, at least in our area, is our employers in Atlanta are trying to force people back into the office full time. And that is not being met with a lot of excitement. So people are pushing back, and employees are, I'd say they kind of have the upper hand right now, that they don't want to go back full time. And if the employer insists, they're leaving. That's causing more of a disruption than anything.
This is why you have to keep working on your development as a leader, because if you're not reading the news and knowing that this is actually what's going on in the talent space, like, you are not informed in terms of the decisions that you're going to be making should more disruption occur, right?
There was actually a little line that I put in at the end of this particular chapter in the book on Ask, Listen, and Invest. How did I write it? Be wary that the siren call of greener pastures can always lure people away or something. But I thought of that as, there's always a siren song out there. There's someone's always singing a prettier song than what you're singing in your company. And if you're not careful, people are going to go follow that. So it's not just that you've got to be asking, listening, investing once a year. You've got to be doing it weekly, daily, if you can. You've got to always be engaging to know what's going on with your people. And if you stay close to them, you're not going to lose them.
I love that, Randy. And something I wanted to ask you about, so like getting off on that tangent, later on in the book, you talk a little bit about the abundance mindset. And I think part of that is like where we sort of went with like keeping investing, but being creative, or even when you were quitting your job to start your own firm. How do you coach leaders to see or start to adopt some abundance principles?
Covey's book has been out forever, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he talked about, that's where I first learned about, abundance versus scarcity mindsets. And if you could just kind of sit there and think about it, if you're a listener, the best leaders I know, do they practice abundance or scarcity? Anytime I ask that question, we always gravitate to people that act with abundance. So the people that we know are really successful are typically acting out of abundance. They're always willing to give and invest and share and do whatever is necessary to help the team. Leaders that operate from scarcity, we can spot those a mile away too. And sometimes there's economic stress, personal stress. Stress behavior is often the opposite of our normal behavior. So you see people that often do that fight or flight, and they just start to retrench. But ultimately, it makes them so much more unsuccessful. I'll give you 2 quick examples I shared in the book. One is an example of scarcity. A female executive reached out to me from one of my big clients here in Atlanta. I'd never worked with her, but she knew of me and said, "Hey, I want to talk to you. I've gotten permission to bring in a coach to work with me and my team." And I said, "Great, sounds like something I typically do. Tell me more." And from then on, for the next 10 minutes, all she did was gripe about how busy she was. She was working 70 hours a week, that her team was ungrateful. Her team wasn't, she just trashed the team, really. So we're, 15, 20 minutes into our conversation, and I challenged her with that respectful candor, Susan. I said, "Can I share something with you? You are operating from scarcity. You are, you want the right result, but the way you're going about it, the way you're talking about your team, the way you're living your life is you're living in this scarcity side. And, so she listened and she was like, I think I need some help. And what we did actually is we helped her rethink her schedule and her priorities and how to get better at time management. And once she got her house in order, she had a new way of looking at her team. She was able to invest in them. And then she was able to go back to maybe thinking more about abundance, but she was wallowing in scarcity. But let me give you another example. Last year, my son Alex has been working for a global retailer for 7 years part-time. Amazing place. They treat him like gold. It's such a good experience. And it says they say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, this store is like his village, and they are awesome to him. Well, he got COVID last year, and when we called in sick, he had never missed a minute of work in the previous 6 years, not 1 minute. The assistant manager calls, and it was a very nice call. Hey, we heard Alex is sick. Just want to let you know we're thinking about you. Just wanted to check in if you need anything. Very nice. Couldn't have been nicer. So it doesn't stop there. The store manager called 10 minutes later, and he gets my wife on the phone. And he was on the phone with her for 15 minutes talking about how much they cared about Alex, just story after story about how people were inspired by him, promised to pay him while he was out sick, all of that. Now that may sound, that's a nice little story, but let me give you the backstory. This store, if I can't tell you the retailer, I don't want to put them at risk on air, but the store itself does almost 20 million a year, just the store. They employ 170 people. And his store was being hit by COVID. He had a lot of unfilled roles. He was under major pressure at the time. I know he was. And he took the time from all of his stress to call and reassure the family of one part-time employee and gave us 15 or 20 minutes of his time. Absolute abundance leadership. Absolutely. He could have wallowed in all his problems. He chose to reach out and be positive. Such a difference in the two leaders. So I think anytime we have a chance, even when we're struggling or not, not feeling it or work's not great or whatever, to reach out and give of ourselves, because leadership is not something that we do in isolation. Leadership is something that we do with and for others. So we have an obligation, if we call ourselves leader, to give to our people, to give to those around us. That's my take. And I think abundance-focused leaders are always thinking, how do I give and serve to my team?
How do we help our leaders listening understand how to cultivate that abundance mindset whilst managing the pressure around us, right? Like, one of the things I've really calibrated is like, we're not even there yet. It's like just the projection that we might be, right? That has people in that fight or flight response. But what would our counsel or coaching be to them?
I always like to start with a little self-awareness. Look in the mirror and just ask yourself, where am I? Am I operating with abundance, or am I operating with scarcity, or something in between? How do I feel right now? How am I doing? And I think just sort of doing that sort of quick checklist of where am I, ABC leader, is a good place to begin, because I think one of the mistakes that a lot of people do is they race out and they try to fix things they don't understand. So you need to kind of know yourself and look in the mirror. Let's begin there. But then I think if you start to recognize, gosh, now that I'm thinking about it, this year I am not making time for my people. This year so far, I probably have just been a blur of activity, but I'm not listening to anybody. So I think the self-awareness exercise will help you develop the list of things where you need to focus your time. So look in the mirror first, evaluate, get some feedback, by the way. That's another element of this. Go to people around you and say, how am I showing up right now? I want to be a better leader. I'd like to maybe practice a little bit more abundance. I'm concerned about how you see me. Can you give me some insight about how I'm showing up to you? Don't do the old, am I doing okay? Because you'll get, sure. But instead, hey, I don't think I'm showing up well. Do you have 2 tips for me? Susan, I think I'm probably, I give myself a C right now. Tell me what I need to do to get to an A. I need your help. And if you look in the mirror, you get the feedback and you get specific, that's how you make that journey back to, or maybe to, abundance for the first time. That's my advice.
Self-awareness is always a great place to start.
Yeah.
So, Randy, just wrapping up here, if there's anything you could tell our community of leaders or the folks that are listening, what would it be?
So we've been real specific and had some great conversation about leadership and business. And I'm going to put something on the table that I would ask everybody, don't dismiss this as philosophical nonsense. I truly mean it because I think it applies to leaders more than anyone. Here's my advice to everyone. If you put generosity into the world, if you put goodness into the world, you will get goodness back. So every day, if you wake up thinking, I'm going to put something good into the world today, I'm going to invest in my family, my friends, my coworkers, my clients, I'm going to put something good out there, and I'm not going to keep score. It is not about what's in it for me. I'm just going to put it out there, and eventually goodness is going to come back to you. If everybody thought that way, the world would be an amazing place. We'd all sleep better. And wow, what a change we could make. That's my advice.
I love it. Who is it that said, when you add value to your people add value to you?
I don't know, but I love that.
John C. Maxwell, I think. Yeah, I love it too. Before you go, Randy, we have to pull out the big guns. We have a question that we love to ask here at the Leadership Launchpad Project. So we would love to ask you before you leave, have you put any thought into what you want your legacy to be?
You know, I will give you maybe a mental image. I think we can, all three of us agree, and maybe your listeners too, I don't want to have the headstone in the graveyard that said he was a great executive. I don't want he was the richest man in the graveyard headstone. I would like it to read he was a good husband and a father, and he served those around him. You know, I want to be known as someone that served and helped other people. That's the legacy. I try to teach that to both my boys, even my son with special needs, and definitely my clients. So I want to be known as someone that served others. And if that's my legacy, I think that's a legacy my dad has. And I will die content if that is how people see me.
Ooh, I love it. And for folks out there, if you want to find anything from Randy, so first off, you can hit your bookstore or Amazon or wherever for Upon Reflection, the essential wisdom for leaders of every generation, and the other 8 books that Randy has written. You can also check out ServiamPartners.com and MyLeadershipFoundry.com. We've also dropped Randy's LinkedIn in the podcast notes, so you can find him there. Mm-hmm. Is there anywhere else that you want folks to find you, Randy?
Those are all the places. I blog a lot, so if you follow me on LinkedIn, I typically have something I put out every week that's just sometimes random, sometimes it's a series. But if you want to get ongoing interaction with me, that's a good place to see what I'm putting out.
Awesome. So follow Randy on LinkedIn. Obviously, for us, you can follow Susan and I on LinkedIn as well. And if you haven't yet, please hit subscribe to Leadership Launchpad Project on your favorite podcast platform. And for all your leadership development needs, head on over to elitehighperformance.com. And also, if you're really interested, Susan's doing some new videos on Instagram.
Oh, God.
If you're interested in getting your high performance leadership coaching minute of the day, head on over to Susan's Instagram. Susan, is there anything you want to leave us with today?
Oh my gosh, living his legacy, not leaving it. I feel so served having Randy with all his sage wisdom in the house today. It's so freaking good to resonate with somebody who's so fervent in his belief that when you put goodness into the world, that's what it's all about. Your needs get met, right? Like, I am so fired up after this interview because this totally reinforces the mission that we're on here to change the way the game's being played with this type of servant, heart-centric, human-centric leadership.
And even despite the fact that it's 30 degrees below zero.
I was just going to say, but I realized people got to go. I was going to say, I feel totally warmed from the inside out. So we met that intention too, Randy. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. And for me, I just want to echo 2 ththings that Randy said. One was leaders are coaches, and to really ask and get feedback and lean into your people. And step 2, listen. So definitely get in there, listen to your folks. And then the other thing is build the self-awareness. One is looking deep within yourself as an individual, but also getting that feedback from the folks around you about how you're showing up. And self-awareness is a key leadership skill. So we've talked about that before. So definitely start there. Randy, thank you so much for joining us this week.
My pleasure. You guys are great. Enjoy the conversation.
Absolutely. We look forward to having you back. And everyone, thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.